So we've been asked to talk about arts integration and collaboration, which are two different entities, but they work together. And so I want to start off by talking about what arts integration is first, and then talking about collaboration. And then we're going to share some lesson plans that we have paired up to create and kind of walk you through what those look like, so that you can see the integration and the collaboration working in tandem with each other. So in 2015, we really pushed that year at the school to really define what arts integration was. We really wanted to nail down a definition that would be school-wide. And funny enough, we have this definition. I had to go back to an email in 2015 to find where that ended up at. And so I hope that from this time forward, we can have this definition kind of more forward in our thinking as we are thinking about what this school stands for and the direction that we need to go as far as meeting our charter. And the definition that we came up with was that it's the simultaneous teaching of one or more fine art standards and core standards to engage students in the process of learning required knowledge from both the arts and the core to meet the learning objectives. So to put this in a little bit more friendly terms, as you meet a learning objective, you are meeting an art standard and you're meeting a core standard at the same time in that lesson. So what does arts integration look like? You're probably already doing a lot of it and not realizing that you're doing so much in your classes. And it's time that we start labeling what we are doing to say, hey, yeah, I am integrating an art in this lesson, and celebrate that you've already got some of that included. When people think arts integration, they think huge. They think massive projects. They think big scale. And yes, that's part of it. But the other part of it is the small everyday stuff that we incorporate into our lessons. So you may allow students to explain their thoughts and their feelings through drawing, through doodling, through labeling. You may allow them to do role-playing situations and discuss the content area through some role-playing situations. You may allow them to get up and move as they learn. Make them stand up, I know we've got math teachers who have had them create the shapes that they're talking about on the graph. I think that's pretty cool. I know that they've taught a dance to a little tune they've created to remember the formulas that they're teaching. And that's all in integration. Memorizing important information through songs. Mrs. Reed in her health class and having the students write STI songs to familiar tunes. They're not going to forget. They're not going to forget what that STI is, I promise. Especially at Christmas time now, because the last set was to Christmas music. But that's a way to integrate. And it's a beautiful way to have them remember the important facts by putting it to a song that they create the lyrics for. Have them demonstrate understanding through making a collage or a model. This year, was it 9th grade English that did Romeo and Juliet, and they had to do like little models or collages? That was brilliant. That's a great integration that we got to see their understanding of the storyline of Romeo and Juliet, the scene, what's going on. So there's a lot that we're already doing in our classrooms, and we can be celebrating that integration. So if you've got a lesson that's got an art standard, whether it's visual art, music, theater, dance, and it's meeting one of the content area standards or core standards, then you are integrating. So what is collaboration in arts integration? Well, it's the combination of the content area teachers working together and combining a core and an art form together that creates learning objectives that meet both standards from those two areas. In 2019, so this is a little bit more recent, I discovered this article that talks about the 4 different levels of collaboration, and it totally makes sense. And so I wanted to bring it in, because I've been using this to help me integrate since I discovered this article. And I put the link there in our slides and in your notes so that you have that to go back and look at if you'd like to. So level 1, this is where you integrate without collaboration. A lot of you, this is what you're doing on that small scale. And so it occurs when a single teacher creates learning objectives that meet both the core standard and an art standard on their own. It's not ideal, because it's not true collaboration, but you are collaborating with their standards. And it works if you understand both. One thing that I do, and I know that other people in my department have done, is we have binders. We have one binder that is printed out, all the fine art standards, so that as we're going through lesson planning, we can just flop it open on our desk and be going through that. And I have this one, if people want to just make a copy of it, you're welcome to borrow it and make a copy. And then my other binder that we have, this is my state standards binder of math, science, language arts, and social studies grades 7 through 9. And I do the same thing. And so I have both standards open side by side. And as I'm planning a lesson, I can be like, okay, I want to focus on this art, but I also want to pull in some English, or I want to pull in some social studies, or we're talking rhythm in music, and I want to pull in math. I can look at the standards side by side. And I've done a fair amount of studying of these ones, so I'm familiar with them. So that when I'm doing this, and I'm doing lesson planning, these are just right there. I can flip through it. I can be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is a level 1 type of integration with collaboration, because I'm looking at both sets of standards. Level 2 is arts integration with input. And in this type of collaboration, you're reaching out to the teacher for that content that you want to integrate into your lesson. So for me, if I'm talking music and I reach out to Brian, hey, I've got this idea for English, or I'm in art humanities and we're talking Shakespeare and I reach out to Tara and like, hey, I want to do this. That's getting input from another teacher and getting ideas that they share with me that then I take and create a lesson plan based off of combining our ideas. But it's all taking their ideas and I'm doing the planning on that. This right here, level 2, is a great way for you to kind of get your feet wet with more collaboration in a junior high setting. A few years ago, it's been longer than that, time flies. When I was teaching art humanities, and it was a required subject for 7th graders coming in, art humanities taught the Shakespeare, and we studied Much Ado About Nothing. And I collaborated with the 7th grade English teachers on what we could do to integrate more English into the art humanities. And it was a really great lesson plan. When art humanities became an elective and wasn't required anymore, then we gave that entire set of lesson plans to the English department, so they had those integrated plans. And that was the type of integration we were doing, was more of a level 2. I'd go and talk and get some ideas and bring it back and create a lesson. And it worked really, really well, getting that input, getting those ideas. Level 3 is where you sit and you do plan the entire lesson together with the teacher in the content area that you're trying to collaborate with, and you plan everything out, but then one teacher presents the whole lesson, which is also a good thing for a junior high setting, to be able to collaborate, have them help you write the lesson plans to make sure that it's truly meeting both sets of standards. But then one person would be responsible for delivering the lesson. And level 4, which is the most ideal, is to have that lesson plan created with your content area teacher that you are wanting to work with. You plan it, and then you each take a portion of that lesson. And so you'll see today as we talk about the lessons that we've created, this is a level 4 example that we're going to be sharing with you, where Brian takes one part of the lesson and teaches the English language arts standard, and then I would take the next part of the lesson and teach the music standard. And we see how the lesson together helps them meet some certain objectives. And so this one's a little bit more challenging in the junior high setting because we don't always share the same kids. But this is the most ideal level of collaboration, because then you're getting the expertise of both teachers in the classroom with the students as you engage them in your content area. Are there any questions on the collaboration or arts integration portion? Okay. Then we're going to have somebody talk about tips to integrate the arts.
Okay, when Anne and I were working together on this, we found, once again, we did lots of research and found an article on how to integrate the arts into your curriculum. But to me, it was not just integration, it was on a higher level of thinking, which is where we were trying to get our students at. And so if you look at the tips, the first one says, approach your curriculum like an artist. Be creative when you plan. The second one says, a rich process means a rich product. Once again, start with the end in mind. Do backwards design. Know exactly what it is you want your students to achieve, and then you will be able to plan your lessons to achieve that certain goal. Engage your students throughout the whole process. That's the one thing that we're trying to focus on is student engagement. How do we get them interested in what we're doing so that we're not always hearing, how am I ever going to use this later in life? The third one says, cultivate artist researchers. This one is really important because in the social studies department, we are working on researching and working with students in providing good examples and concrete examples to justify whatever it is we're doing. And so if you look at letter A, it says, what students don't know will lead them to what they need to know. So start with understanding what your students don't know. Find out where their level of understanding is before you start one of these huge integrated or collaborated lesson plans. And then letter B says, help students become their own advocates for finding answers. I think sometimes we coddle our students too much, and when that constant raising of hand, I don't get it, I don't get it, I don't get it. And what they're doing is they're just searching for a way for you to find the answer for them. Ms. Harmon, which page is this on? Where do I find this? And I've gotten to the point where you have to look at two sources first before you can ask me. You have to use either your textbook or the primary source document or whatever we're using. You can Google it, and then you can ask me where to find the answer. But I'm not just going to walk up and point it out to you because they're not learning how to become their own advocate for finding answers or problem solving.
Okay, so why are we talking about arts integration, collaboration, and student engagement? Well, it's a direction that we've identified as a school that we need to move forward on and do more with. So I wanted to just present a few benefits that arts integration has shown on student engagement to kind of give you an idea of why we think this is so important, and we want to focus on that. So arts integration boosts thinking in creative ways. And we have students that struggle with just having it be logical, but if you present it to them in a creative way, it clicks. And so this is boosting that creative thinking. It teaches students to take time to be more careful with their work and more observant with what is going on around them. Arts integration projects make them slow down so they can learn. It's not about just kind of pushing the assignment out and getting it done as fast as they can. It's going to cause them to stop and think more and be more observant because now they're looking at things in a different way, and it catches them off guard just a little bit. It challenges students to be learners at the level they are at. This is a great UDL thing. If you are doing arts integration and you are having these students engaged in one of the art forms, they can approach it at whatever level they're at, and they can be successful at it. And they can do it and be comfortable with the level that they're at, which I think is huge for student engagement. The project's not too hard because it's what they are choosing to do at their level. It connects students to their own cultures as well as cultures around the world. So easy to pull these little ties in and make it more meaningful, more personal to them, as well as teaching them about other people around them and make them more aware of who their peers are and where their peers might be coming from, and creates a classroom of empathy as well as engagement. It reaches students through creativity to engage in learning where they otherwise not be engaged. I've got some students right now that they actually take more notes from me through doodles than they do writing things down. They actually draw out the notes and they remember it. Okay, and I just let them do it. They're gonna, if it's gonna be successful for them, then, write down the topic we're talking about, few key things, but then go ahead, doodle your notes. Draw it out. Let me see where you come up with, because for you, that's the way that you're learning in my classroom, and that's awesome, and I want to support that. It also embraces the notion that all students are different, and offers a variety to them of ways that they can construct and demonstrate understanding. Not everybody's going to be able to read a passage and then just regurgitate the comprehension back to you, but they might be able to draw you a picture about it. They might be able to act it out for you. They might be able to come up with a song that represents what it is. And so we want to really engage as many students as we can. And by integrating the arts, we're taking on more ways that they can engage successfully. And then it offers novelty and variety in how students learn, which increases their engagement as well. If the lesson plans are being differentiated and we're trying to pull in different art forms, then it keeps it fresh for them. It doesn't get stagnant or stale, and they're more likely to be engaged. So we are going to, Brian and I are going to introduce the lesson plan that we came up with that demonstrates the collaboration, it demonstrates the arts integration going on, and highlight the student engagement that we see.
Okay, thank you. Just before Laura and I go into this, I think a lot, while I was doing this, I thought a lot about students that are really difficult for me to connect with. And I think as an English teacher, I think that is one of the subjects that a lot of students would rather gouge their eyeballs out than have to sit through reading a book for an hour and 10 minutes, or having a discussion, or completing assignments, right? And I think of students, for example, the other day at the guitar concert, I was sitting in the back, and I was sitting there, and I was looking up there at all of the students that I have who are in Tim's class. And I saw Jet, right? And Jet is a super successful student in Tim's class, right? In my class, I cannot get Jet to write his name on his paper. Like, not even that, right? And he's a good kid. Like, I love having him. He's kind, he's super respectful. And I had this moment of like, aha, where like, what am I doing? You know, we have such a valuable resource here at the school where these kids are so involved in the arts and care so much. And then maybe some of us other teachers are in a classroom and are like racking our brain about how to get this kid involved, right? And I really do think that sometimes we come to be PD and we feel like there are so many things thrown at us, like just things to add to the to-do list. But I don't feel like arts integration is a to-do. I feel like it's a tool that we just need to utilize a little bit better. And so this is a hypothetical lesson that Laura and I have put together. We both do both of these things, and so we're just giving a way to better integrate these things, right? And so this lesson that we are presenting meets quite a few English standards for my English teachers who are here. We know that lots of the English standards intertwine with each other and they're hard to separate. And so we just chose two. The first is a standard of literacy, and it's to determine the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in a text, including figurative and connotative meanings, analyze the impact of rhymes and other repetition sounds, or a specific verse or stanza of a poem or a section of a story or drama. This term, when I introduced our poetry, I introduced a very appropriate, but a video of Tupac in court, right? And Tupac's sitting there, and he's up on the stand and he's being interviewed, right? And he says, okay, so he says, tell me what you do for a living. And he says, well, I'm a poet. And he said, and so the man who's interviewing him says, a poet? I think you're a rapper. And he says, no, I'm not a rapper. Please don't call me that. And he asks him why. And then Tupac goes into this long speech about iambic pentameter and poetry and how rap is really just poetry, right? And so I thought that was the perfect example of the way that these two things collaborate, right? Here you have someone who is a very successful rapper, right? Not anymore, but who at his time was like at the head of his industry. And he's saying that he's a poet, he's not a rapper. He doesn't want to be called that. And then for our music standard, we have listened to and discussed a variety of musical styles and ideas and describe how various sounds can be used to represent different experiences, moods, visual images, and or storylines. And then Some secondary objectives, just one more, to bore you a little bit. Follow rules for collegial discussions, track progress towards specific goals and deadlines, and define individual roles as needed. And then for our music standards, discuss with guidance various elements of a musical work, such as form, phrasing, and style. Something that we really focus on in English is pulling evidence from texts in order to support anything that you say in an argument, right? And oftentimes, our 8th graders are pretty good at this because they've had practice, but our 7th graders are not. And they really struggle, I think, to pull apart a text because to them it seems a little bit abstract. They're trying to pull evidence from something that's just a collection of words, right? And so in my class, I really try to utilize art in order for them to be able to better do this skill. And utilizing music like we're going to do in this lesson plan. So here is how the lesson looks on my end in a nutshell, right? So and we do this all the time. The kids ask me to do it. They come up to me and say, Mr. Clark, can we do the poem draw thing? So I will read a poem out loud to the class, and I'll have students, I'll just ask them, just draw what comes to mind. Draw what you hear. I don't give them any direction that is more specific than that. Students have the opportunity to analyze poetry by doing this in a way that's familiar to them, right? Something that's a little bit more approachable prior to spending the next 6 weeks focusing on poetry, which for them is oftentimes difficult because it's so abstract. Okay. So, I want to give you an example that I've given the students. It's a poem, I'll read it to you, and this is a poem that I've read to the students, and I'm going to show you some work that they've done. So it's called Center by Billy Collins. At the first chink of sunrise, the windows on one side of the house are frosted with stark orange light. And in every pale blue window on the other side, a full moon hangs, a round white blaze. I look out one side, then the other, moving from room to room, as if between countries or parts of my life. Then I stop and stand in the middle. When I do this with the kids, I'll give you the full experience. I stand on a table. Then I stop and stand in the middle. And when I begin to turn slowly, I can feel the whole house turning with me, rotating free of the earth. The sun and moon in all the windows move too, with the tips of my fingers. The solar system turning by degrees. With me, morning's egomaniac, turning on the hallway carpet in my slippers, taking the cold orange, blue, and white for a quiet, unhurried spin. All wheel and compass, axis and reel, as wide awake as I will ever be. So for a moment, I want you to just picture what you might draw in this poem, right? And so I'm going to show you some student examples. And this was one of the first times in the year that I felt like my entire class really participated. And it was one of the first times where I felt like I saw some of my students who don't participate very much in a different light, right? So our first one is a man who's in the middle, right? And he has the sun on one side, the moon on the other, and a compass. And then our second is from one of our students, Maya. Many of you know Maya. But she decided to write, right? That wasn't part of the directions that I gave them. I just asked to draw whatever they felt, right? And then my third one is from Lucas Page. And Lucas, this one cracked me up. Because he has little people climbing upstairs in the middle of his house. And I feel like this is a perfect representation of Lucas. I feel like Tracy can connect with me on this. Is he's standing on the top of the house as opposed to in the house, right? And then here's another. And then this last one is my favorite. I don't know how many of you have Tucker, but he is one of my favorite people ever. And so when I saw this, I went up to him and I said, Tucker, what did you draw? And he said, oh, well, the man's wearing bunny slippers, Mr. Clark. And I said, what does that say in the top left corner? And he said, it says flick, like he was flicking the light switch on. And it mentions bunny slippers in the poem. And I don't know how many of you even recognize that as I read the poem. Not bunny slippers, slippers, right? And I went up to him and I thought, Tucker, you are a genius. Like, it was so interesting to me that these are the things that he chose to draw. And so I am going to pass the mic to Laura and let her explain a little bit, and then we'll come back and do something together.
Okay, so at this point, in our hypothetical lesson plan, I would take their drawings, and obviously we can include some visual art standards into our lesson as well. So it's got some other things going on with the drawings. But I would take the drawings and the phrases, and we would talk about the connections that they made to the poetry in their artwork, and transfer that to a discussion on the music and how we can pull those same thoughts, same feelings from instrumental music. We would take lyrics out so that lyrics weren't influencing anything. Then we would have discussions on the music and how, let's listen to this one and do something very similar where they can draw what they feel, what they hear, what comes to mind, and use the same process that Brian just used in English with the poetry. But then we would take that and have the students take their pictures from English, find an instrumental song that represents what they pulled out of that poetry, and either present it while the music is playing, and read the poem or recite the poem with their choice behind them to give an opportunity to express what they got out of the poetry, or have them do a recording where it's their voice with this music in the background, whatever level they were comfortable with. And so we want to kind of give you an idea of what that might end up looking like. So I took Maya's picture, and some of the keywords that she put in there that stood out. I mean, she had the two houses, and she said, numb mindset, feeling stuck, trapped. And I took those words and found some music that kind of encapsulates what her picture looks at. So I put the smaller slide up here on the board, and you can flip back in your notes to hers if you want to see a bigger version. And we're actually going to play that music, and I'm going to have Brian read the poem again with this music behind it, so you can get the next step with the integration and how this can really help a student demonstrate that they've connected to the meaning of the poem through music.
I'm going to use this, actually. You didn't know you were coming to a poetry slam, huh? At the first chink of sunrise, the windows on one side of the house are frosted with stark orange light. And in every pale blue window on the other side, a full moon hangs, a round white blaze. I look out one side, then the other, moving from room to room, as if between countries or parts of my life. Then I stop and stand in the middle, extend both arms like Leonardo's man in a perfect circle. And when I begin to turn slowly, can feel the whole house turning with me, rotating free of the earth. The sun and the moon in all the windows move too with the tips of my fingers, the solar system turning by degrees. With me, morning's egomaniac, turning on the hallway carpet in my slippers, taking the cold orange, blue, and white for a quiet, unhurried spin. All wheeling compass, axis, and reel, as wide awake as I will ever be. And so, thank you. We snap at poetry slams. And so, really quickly, some tips on engagement that we wanted to point out. First, like I had mentioned previously, it can oftentimes be very difficult, right, to get a 12-year-old child to pull apart something as abstract as poetry or something as figuratively rich as poetry, right? But by doing this, we take something that for them can feel very abstract and we put it into a picture, right? And then we take a picture and we ask them to pull apart a picture. And we say, so why did you decide to draw a man standing in the middle, right? And instead of telling me, why don't you look in the poem and tell me where you found him, right? And so now not only are they able to take something and put it into a visual image, which is part of what we're trying to do, but they're able to pull evidence from the text to show you what they just did, right? And so also, as parts of our integration, both the drawing and the background music demonstrate a student's ability to determine the meaning of the text and gives two different opportunities to express their understanding of a poem, right? And with music playing in the background, the idea is that students are more inclined to work with the music, right? They're choosing music that helps capture the meaning of the poem. Right? We probably wouldn't, I mean, maybe we would do that poem to a rock song. I don't know. It also allows students to demonstrate their understanding of how the music they chose expresses the feelings and the meanings in the poems. And then students with low comprehension have a creative way to engage in the text and express their understanding in diverse ways.
Okay, we're going to talk, give them a round of applause. We are going to talk about integration of U.S. history, or history of social studies department with art. And this is something that I know my departments and I are doing all the time. We integrate art into our curriculum. You'll see her posters on the hall. I have student work hanging in my classroom all the time. And so I think we integrate quite well. And I think everybody does. It's easy to say, okay, illustrate what you're feeling and illustrate what you think you're seeing. But once again, that's level one. And so as we were going through, as Anna and I were going through this, the first thing we had to do was we had to, like Laura was saying, examine each other's core standards. And I was enlightened by how much I really do in a classroom when I looked at the visual arts standards. Now, keeping in mind that Anne has two levels of standards. She's got the 7/8 standards, and then she's got a 9 standard that's completely different. And they're a lot more higher level thinking. So when we planned this lesson, we did something that I do in my classroom, but I don't do it to the level of the standards that I actually researched. So if you look on our Utah core standards for visual arts and for U.S. history, we're going to examine a piece of art that I actually use in my classroom, but I've never done it to the extent of a level 4 engagement assignment. So if, you know, and I'm not going to bore you with reading them all, but if you'd like to look at those and just kind of see, for the first one was a level for the 7th and 8th, and then there's a level 1. So the top one is for 9th graders and the other two are for 7th and 8th graders. So I kind of incorporated them both into this lesson. And so I'm going to let Anne show you the piece of art that we chose to use for our hypothetical lesson plan, which, by the way, would be a very easy one to collaborate with when we do this again.
So what I'm going to be doing with the students is showing them Washington crossing the Delaware, and we're going to discuss that in an art historical setting as well as a technique setting. So we talk about the way it's painted, how big it is, how it's framed, where it is, what its history is, a little bit about the artist and things like that, so that they gain understanding of the piece of art just as a piece of art. So we would go through that. We would talk about the color palette used. Change that. So we talk about this color palette and what's being used, because at this level with the students, they just think we use every color all the time. They do, and picking a palette's really important. And so we discuss that and how those colors are used to create certain emotions, because there are emotions involved in the different color palettes and different color schemes. And so we would discuss that. We discuss body language in this painting. We would discuss all of the things that are actually happening. So not the historical ramifications of it, but just what they see. And so they can hypothesize what's happening in the piece, when they think it is, where they think it is, why they think it is. And we would talk about the techniques involved in creating a piece of work like this. So once we do that, we do a drawing lesson. They would color this in with the right color palette. So they would use that color palette that Lutz used in Washington Crossing the Delaware in order to convey that they understand the painting itself. So after that, then I would hand it over to Annette, and Annette would talk about the history of the piece.
She forgot to show you that she actually has right here an activity that she's created to let the kids analyze the painting, which is important for them to have some sort of rubric, some sort of framework. So this would be the art assignment piece that she would give in class. And it's important for them to study the piece before I teach the historical context because it's bogus. This is not anything what it looked like. This is not what really happened. It's a fantasized fairy tale depiction of American patriotism during the time period. Am I correct, Miss Cinda? But it's a beautiful piece of art, and we use it as one of our national pieces of art. So if we go to the history ones, I feel what you want. And I didn't put the history lesson in here because most of this would be discussion of what they learned about the artwork. I would then bring them into class and discuss it because, like I said, this is a piece of art we actually talk about in my class, and we kind of use it. We're studying another war right now, and we've referred to this art piece in class again. So it's something that I bring back to remind the kids of what people thought of during the time period, what their feelings were, how they view the time period. And keep in mind, it's really good for kids to understand that they didn't have the technology we have today, so this painting was done way after the fact. And so sometimes the feelings, the actual emotions of, they were freezing to death crossing the Delaware. And then our expected results, what I want to do is I want the kids to work in groups. I want them to talk it out. I want them, after they do their research, not to have it be some individual thing where it's like, here, just do this assignment and you're done, turn it in, and then Canvas will keep all of your information. I want them to actually engage in collaborative work together to figure out what is happening. And once again, to figure out if this painting is the actual factual depiction of what history was like. I want them to have the opportunity to participate in visual, tactile, and auditory learning experiences. I am a big fan of learning styles. I know they're kind of outdated, but I have just seen too much proof over my hundreds of years of teaching that show kids to have very different learning styles, or they think they have different learning styles. But when you get into teaching, kind of like what you were saying with was it Tucker? When you start talking, they really do have a style, and we need to find out what that is and then play on it, and then also remind them that they have to engage in other learning styles. So a lot of my students will rebel when I assign an art project because that's not their learning style. They're A-type personalities, and they just want, give me the assignment, let me write down some answers and get a nice compliant A. Where in reality, they need to be able to think outside the box and use the other side of their brain and be a little more creative once in a while. So this last slide is our hypothetical growth, and I actually used, if you'll click one more, I think there, I actually used students that we had as a hypothetical study, but also I kind of applied those to students in my class. And the first one shows the art without, the assignment without the art understanding. And I have kids, we analyze all the time, political cartoons, we analyze artwork, and we have them draw and do all kinds of things. And I actually have these scores, and some of them do very poorly. And I actually categorized each of the students. It tells you what kind of student they are, what they love, what they work well with. The ones that are detail-oriented an art assignment freaks them out, because they want to do it perfectly, and if they can't do art perfectly, they feel like they have failed with the assignment. So I actually applied this to students, gave them grades, and then just showed growth after doing an assignment where we actually do a little more research, a little more depth. So there is the chance for students to progress and do well with this. So really quick, we're done. So did you want to?
So I just wanted to tell you guys that I really appreciate those of you that are putting art into your curriculum, because what I actually do as an art teacher is not necessarily get them to tell me how they feel through art and what they think. I'm teaching them the technical aspects of how to create a work of art. So we don't delve into a lot of that stuff in my classroom. So I appreciate you giving them the opportunity to take what I've taught them technically into your classroom and be able to convey what they feel better through what they've learned through art in a technical fashion. So I just want you to keep doing that, and if you ever need help with any of that, I am more than willing to give you pointers or what would work as far as an assignment where you can integrate art, because I think it's wonderful. And I wanted to kind of end with this thought on the fusion of arts. So the fusion of arts with core content is important because rather than seeing humanities or science as knowledge on a page, something to be recited in an exam, students see far greater benefits when art reflects life and makes knowledge, stories, and facts come alive. You get engagement from students. You get students caring about what they're learning. The arts add an emotional, creative response to core content. Transforming learning into creating art not only engages students, it allows content to live through them and provides a purpose for communicating knowledge to the world.